Let me show you how to avoid turning your songs into riff salads. Before I get into this, hit the subscribe button and the bell icon. If you're wanting to learn how to understand and write progressive music, this is the place to be. One of the most common problems I encounter when teaching how to write prog is an overabundance of ideas. Songs with 30, 40, 50 different ideas all stitched together with a bunch of different riffs. Now, it is important to have multiple ideas and motifs, but it's even more important to develop those motifs throughout a piece of music. Today I want to talk specifically about riffs, about developing your riffs to their full potential, how to take one riff and turn it into multiple riffs to help your music feel more connected. To do this, I want to take a look at a few of my own tunes, and I'll share how I like to get the most out of my riffs. Here's a crazy riff from my song Reignition. This riff is wild and it goes all over the place, but inside this riff are a number of smaller motifs that I expand upon in other riffs. The opening of this riff is used 3 different times to transition between different sections of the song. The first is a shortened version out of the first chorus back to the main riff. I use the first 4 measures of the riff to transition to the second chorus. And then again to move into the last riff. There's also this tritone power chord figure that happens in the riff. This happens at the end of each of these transition riffs I just covered, but it also gets expanded into its own riff in a few places. It happens once under this super shreddy lead in the second verse. And then at the end of the song is a breakdown. In the original riff, this figure goes by super quick and it isn't terribly memorable, but I extracted it from the riff and turned it into its own riff, so instead of writing a whole different riff for this heavy breakdown at the end, I use a riff that's already been hinted at earlier, and that helps to tie everything together. One last place where I borrow from that original riff is in the first pre-chorus. Here I'm just taking the first couple of notes from the original riff and building a whole new riff, but the original riff does inform the scale choice and the overall sound I'm using. From this one riff, I've written 2 other riffs and 3 transitions, so while this riff never plays again in its original form, it influences lots of other parts of the song, and having these recognizable riffs pop up throughout the tune help to make it more cohesive overall. In this approach, I'm taking a complex riff and grabbing smaller, simpler motifs from it and turning those into new riffs. Now let's take a look at the opposite approach. This is my tune Unbalanced Tranquility, which I just remixed this week. You can find that new video on the channel. Here, the majority of this tune is based on this opening keyboard motif. This simple motif, D, F, E, B flat, A, F, becomes the foundation for a lot of the song. The main riff, for example, uses this with a faster double picking approach. You can see here how many times I use this in the riff. The D, F, E plays 3 times, twice double picked and once held out an octave higher, and the B flat A, F is double picked here as well. So I've taken this basic motif and I've used it to build a much more complex riff. There's also a more dissonant variation of this motif in the second half of the main riff. Here you get this B, G sharp, F instead of the B flat A, F, so I'm taking this motif and making a darker variation on it for this part of the riff. This same idea happens in this heavy riff at the end of the song. I'm taking those same melodic motifs, moving them an octave lower on the guitar and changing up the rhythm, and you end up with this breakdown riff that's cool on its own, but it's also connected to the rest of the song. This motif also happens in a few smaller riffs throughout the song, in between the melody of the choruses. And in the second verse. In Reignition, I took a complex riff and turned it into smaller, simpler riffs, and here I took a simple motif and turned it into multiple, longer, more complex riffs, but in both songs the idea is the same. Instead of writing a bunch of unconnected riffs, I'm building multiple riffs from the same idea. This still gives you that same effect of having new riffs instead of just copying and pasting riffs over and over, but it makes for a much more cohesive composition overall. Try some of these ideas out for yourself. I think this approach to writing riffs is a great way to avoid riff salad, and it works super well in this style of music. And if you enjoyed this lesson, subscribe, hit the bell notification, like, comment, share, and I'll see you all in the next video. Till then, stay proggy.